My brother said that if I disappeared, no one in the family would even notice. So I disappeared. But I took all the money from the accounts with me. Before continuing the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss more stories, and leave your like on the video. I learned I was different when I was 7. Not the kind of different you celebrate, the kind that makes you invisible in your own home. My parents adopted me when they couldn't have children. For 3 years, I was enough. Then my mother got pregnant, and suddenly I became the practice run, the trial version they'd tolerate until the real thing arrived. My brother Kyle came home from the hospital, and I watched my mother's face transform into something I'd never seen before. Pure, uncomplicated love. The kind she'd never quite managed with me, though I'd spent years trying to earn it. I told myself I was imagining things. Kids are dramatic, right? But children notice everything, especially the things adults think they're hiding. When Kyle learned to walk, my parents threw a party. When I'd done the same, there were a few photos, quickly filed away. His first words were recorded, replayed, celebrated. Mine existed somewhere in a baby book my mother rarely opened. By the time I was 10, the pattern was unmistakable. Kyle got the new clothes. I got hand-me-downs from cousins. His birthday parties had themes and decorations. Mine were quiet family dinners, if remembered at all. When he brought home a B, my parents celebrated his effort. When I brought home straight A's, I got a nod and a reminder not to get cocky. I learned to make myself useful. If I couldn't be loved, maybe I could be needed. I helped with dinner, cleaned without being asked, watched Kyle when they wanted alone time. I became the responsible one, the easy one, the one who didn't require much attention. My mother would sometimes pat my shoulder absently and say, "You're such a good girl," in the same tone she'd use to praise the dishwasher for running quietly. Functional. Appreciated for not causing problems. Kyle grew up knowing he was wanted. I grew up knowing I was kept. The difference showed in everything. He learned he could make mistakes and still be cherished. I learned that mistakes proved their doubts about me were justified. He developed confidence. I developed hypervigilance. I remember one particular evening when I was 12. I'd spent weeks preparing for the school science fair, staying up late to perfect my project on renewable energy. I won first place. When I came home with the blue ribbon, practically vibrating with excitement, my mother glanced up from helping Kyle with his homework. "That's nice, sweetie," she said, already turning back to my brother. "Kyle, remember, the answer is 7, not 6. You're so close." I stood there holding my ribbon, feeling it grow heavier in my hand. Kyle looked at me with something like pity. Even at 9, he could see what I refused to acknowledge. The ribbon went into a drawer. Kyle's honorable mention from the spelling bee went on the refrigerator for 6 months. I started working at 15, telling them I wanted to save for college. Really, I just wanted something that was mine. Money I'd earned, that couldn't be taken away or redistributed to the favorite child. My parents seemed relieved. One less expense to worry about. By 16, I was paying for my own clothes, school supplies, even my phone bill. Kyle still got everything handed to him. When I pointed this out once, my father said I was more capable and should be proud of my independence. Translation: they didn't want to spend money on me when they could spend it on him. I watched my parents attend every single one of Kyle's baseball games, cheering from the stands with painted faces and homemade signs. When I made the honor roll 4 years straight, they forgot to come to the awards ceremony, twice. "You understand, right?" my mother said when I finally asked why they missed the second one. "Kyle had a game that night. And you've won before, so we didn't think you'd mind." I minded. I just learned not to show it. My father worked in insurance. My mother as a part-time office manager. They weren't wealthy, but they weren't struggling either. There was money for Kyle's expensive baseball equipment, for his gaming system, for the laptop he wanted. When I asked for help buying a used car so I could get to work more easily, they suggested I save up a bit more first. I saved for 18 months while taking 2 buses to my restaurant job. Kyle got a car for his 16th birthday. I told myself it would get better when I moved out. That distance would make them miss me, see my value. I held on to that hope like a life raft, even as I felt myself drowning in their indifference. I was wrong, of course, but I wouldn't learn that for several more years. Some patterns don't break. They just become more obvious. College was my escape route, or so I thought. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through state university while living in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates. Every dollar I earned went toward tuition, books, and rent. I ate ramen more nights than I care to remember, studied in the library until closing because it was warmer than our apartment in winter, and wore the same 3 outfits in rotation. but it was mine. My struggle, my achievement. Kyle went to the same university 2 years later. My parents paid his full tuition, his housing in a nice apartment near campus, his meal plan, even his spring break trips to Cancun and Miami. When I asked why they couldn't have helped me even a little, my father shifted uncomfortably and said they hadn't been in a position to help back then. That was a lie. I'd seen the bank statements accidentally left on the kitchen counter during my last visit home. They'd had the money. They just hadn't wanted to spend it on me. The betrayal of that knowledge sat in my chest like a stone. I graduated with a degree in accounting and a 3.8 GPA. My parents came to the ceremony but left early to avoid traffic. Kyle graduated with a 2.5 and a communications degree he'd barely worked for. They threw him a party at Riverside Hall, invited the entire extended family, gave speeches about how proud they were of their son, their baby boy who'd worked so hard. I got a card with $50 in it and a text that said, "Sorry we couldn't stay longer at your graduation. So proud of you." The contrast was almost funny. Almost. I threw myself into my career with the same intensity I'd approached everything else. If I couldn't earn their love, I'd earn success. Within 3 years, I was working for a mid-sized firm in the city, managing multiple accounts, building a reputation for reliability and precision. I was good at what I did. Really good. My boss told me I had a real future there. Kyle bounced between entry-level marketing jobs, never lasting more than 8 months anywhere. He'd complain about demanding bosses, unreasonable expectations, office politics. The truth was simpler. He'd never learned to work hard because he'd never had to. Every job expected basic things, showing up on time, meeting deadlines, being professional, things that felt impossible to him. "They just don't appreciate creative people," he'd tell our parents over dinner. They'd nod sympathetically while I sat there, invisible as always, thinking about the 80-hour weeks I'd pulled to make senior accountant by 28. I bought my first condo when I was 26. Small, but mine. 1 bedroom in a decent neighborhood, with a mortgage I could actually afford. I spent weeks picking out furniture from discount stores, painting the walls myself, making it feel like home. I was so proud the day I got the keys. I called my parents to share the news. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said, her voice distracted. "Listen, is this a good time? Kyle is here and needs to talk to us about something." I could hear him in the background, his voice tight with frustration about his latest job drama. She hung up after less than 2 minutes. I stood in my empty living room, phone in hand, feeling that familiar ache of being less important than whatever crisis Kyle was manufacturing that week. Kyle still lived at home in his childhood bedroom at 24 years old. Rent-free, bills paid, meals cooked. The pattern continued through our late 20s. I dated, had relationships that didn't work out, learned about myself through therapy I paid for with my own insurance. Kyle dated too, but every girlfriend eventually left him. He couldn't understand why. After all, women should appreciate a guy who was honest and told it like it is. He never considered that his honesty was often just cruelty. His directness just selfishness wrapped in a prettier package. By my late 20s, I was making good money. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Senior accountant at a growing firm, respected by my colleagues, trusted by clients. I had a savings account, a retirement plan, a life I'd built entirely on my own. I took quiet pride in that, even if no one in my family seemed to notice or care. Kyle, at 26, had just been fired from his 4th job in 3 years. This time for attendance issues. He'd been showing up late, taking long lunches, calling in sick to play video games with his friends online. My mother called me in tears, as if someone had died. "He's going through a hard time," she said, her voice breaking. "The job market is so difficult right now. He just needs some support while he figures things out." She didn't ask about my life, didn't ask how I was doing, if I was happy, if I needed anything. It had been months since we'd had a real conversation that wasn't about Kyle's problems or my parents' concerns about him. I should have seen it coming, should have recognized the setup. But some part of me, that little girl still desperate for their approval, wanted to believe this might be different. "He's family," my father said when he called a week later. "Family helps each other." I'd been helping myself for over a decade. I'd been family all along. They just never noticed. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was making dinner in my condo, finally having a quiet night after a brutal week at work, when my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. "We need to talk about Kyle," he said without preamble. Of course. It was always about Kyle. He lost his job, my father continued. The company downsized. That was the official story. I later learned the truth from a mutual friend. Kyle had been caught sleeping at his desk twice, missed an important client presentation because he'd stayed up gaming until 4 a.m., and had been generally unreliable for months. They hadn't downsized. They'd cut him loose. "He's moving back home," my mother added. I hadn't realized she was on the call too. Just temporarily, while he finds something new. Temporarily. Kyle had never left home. Not really. He'd tried living on his own once, for about 4 months, before the responsibility of paying rent and utilities became too much. My parents had welcomed him back with open arms, just like they always did. "That's tough," I said, stirring my pasta. "I'm sure he'll find something soon." There was a pause. The kind of pause that meant they wanted something. "The thing is," my mother began, "we've been covering a lot of his expenses. The car insurance, his phone, his student loans. And now with him not working," my hand tightened on the wooden spoon. I knew where this was going. "We're stretched a bit thin," my father admitted. "I'm retiring in a few years, and we need to be more careful with money." The irony was staggering. They'd spent my entire childhood and young adulthood pouring money into Kyle, while I scrambled for scraps. Now they were stretched thin. "We were hoping," my mother said, her voice taking on that particular tone, guilt-inducing, slightly wounded, "that maybe you could help out, just until Kyle gets back on his feet." I stared at my dinner, watching the steam rise from the pot. Part of me wanted to laugh, part of me wanted to scream, but mostly I felt that old familiar ache, that desperate hope that maybe if I helped, maybe if I proved myself useful enough, they'd finally see me. "What kind of help?" I asked, hating myself for even considering it. "Nothing major," my father said quickly. "Maybe contribute to some of the household expenses, just for a few months?" A few months turned into 6, then a year, then 2 years. At first, it was small amounts. 200 here for groceries, 300 there for the electric bill. My parents thanked me, awkwardly but genuinely. Kyle said nothing, but I told myself he was embarrassed, that his pride was wounded. I wanted to believe there was something redeemable in his silence. Then my father actually did retire, and their income shrank. My contributions grew. 500 for the mortgage 1 month, 800 the next. They started calling more frequently, always with another urgent expense. The water heater broke. The car needed new tires. The property tax was due. I set up a joint account that I funded monthly. $1,500, like clockwork. It was supposed to be for necessities, groceries, utilities, basic household expenses. Instead, I watched the statements show charges at expensive restaurants, a new gaming computer for Kyle, premium cable packages, designer clothes. When I brought it up gently, suggesting we should budget more carefully, my mother got defensive. "We're not children," she said, hurt in her voice. "We know how to manage money." Except they didn't. They'd managed to spend decades spoiling Kyle and were now extending that pattern with my money. Kyle finally got another job. Part-time, low-paying, but something. He worked at a sporting goods store 20 hours a week. It barely covered his car insurance and phone bill. He made no moves to contribute to the household or look for full-time work. "He's trying," my mother insisted when I asked why he wasn't looking for something with more hours. "You know how hard the job market is." I worked 50 hours a week. I'd built a career from nothing. I'd never had the luxury of trying being good enough. But still, I kept paying. Because sometimes, very occasionally, my mother would text me something sweet. "Thank you for being so responsible." Or my father would say, "I don't know what we'd do without you." Those crumbs of acknowledgement fed something in me I didn't want to examine too closely. That desperate little girl, still hoping that maybe this time they'd finally love her the way they loved Kyle. My therapist asked me once why I kept doing it. Why I kept funding a family that had never really treated me like I belonged. I didn't have a good answer. Just a question that had haunted me my entire life. What else could I do to make them love me? I was 31 years old, funding my parents' retirement and my brother's extended adolescence, and I was still invisible, except to their bank account. The account became my second mortgage, $1,500 a month every month for 2 years. I watched it drain away faster than I could fill it, funding a lifestyle my parents couldn't afford and Kyle refused to work for. I started tracking the expenses obsessively. Maybe if I understood where the money went, I could convince them to be more careful. The spreadsheet grew longer each month. Premium streaming services, all of them. Restaurants 3, 4 times a week. A gym membership Kyle never used. New clothes, new electronics, subscription boxes for things they didn't need. My own budget tightened in response. I stopped eating out, canceled my own subscriptions, put off replacing my aging car. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was sacrificing so my family could indulge. But there were moments that made it bearable. Small moments when I felt seen. My mother called one afternoon, just to chat. Not to ask for money, just to talk. She told me about her garden, asked about my work. For 20 minutes, I felt like her daughter instead of her ATM. When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. My father texted me after I helped with an unexpectedly large repair bill. "You're really saving us here. I know I don't say it enough, but we appreciate you." Kyle, surprisingly, showed brief flashes of something like awareness. Once, when I visited for Sunday dinner, he pulled me aside. "This is weird, right?" he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You paying for everything." My heart jumped. Was he finally seeing it? Finally understanding? "I mean, I'm gonna get a better job soon," he continued quickly. "Full-time, benefits, the whole thing. Then I can help out too." It never materialized, of course. The job search was always active, the interviews always promising, but nothing ever came through. I wondered sometimes if he was even trying. 3 months later, I reviewed the account statement over my morning coffee. They'd gone over budget by $800. Again, I closed my eyes and counted to 10 before calling my mother. "We need to talk about the spending," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "What spending?" She sounded genuinely confused. "The account is supposed to be for necessities, groceries, utilities, insurance, but you're spending on restaurants, shopping, things that aren't essential. We're not being irresponsible," she said, her tone shifting to defensive. "We're just living. We've been careful our whole lives. Can't we enjoy our retirement a little? With my money?" The words came out sharper than I intended. There was silence on the other end. "I didn't realize we were such a burden to you," my mother said quietly, and I felt that familiar stab of guilt. "That's not what I meant. We'll be more careful," she said, voice tight. "I have to go." She hung up. I sat there holding my phone, feeling like I'd somehow become the villain in a story where I was the one being used. 2 weeks later, Kyle added me on a group chat with my parents. It was a meme about choosing beggars, people who ask for help then complain about how they get it. The message was clear. I was being ungrateful for the privilege of funding their lifestyle. I didn't respond. What could I say? The spending didn't decrease. If anything, it got worse. A weekend trip to the coast, new furniture for the living room, Kyle's car needed work. Expensive work that could have waited, but they authorized immediately. I increased my contribution to $2,000 a month. It wasn't sustainable, but what else could I do? Let them lose the house? Watch them struggle? My savings account stopped growing, then started shrinking. I was 33 years old, making decent money, and I was going backwards financially. But I told myself it was worth it. Because sometimes, just sometimes, my mother would say she was proud of me. My father would acknowledge how much I helped. Those moments, rare and precious, kept me going. Kyle started calling me directly when he needed something. Not for the household, but for him. Concert tickets, a new laptop, payments on credit cards he'd maxed out. "Come on," he'd say when I hesitated. "You're already helping everyone else. What's a few hundred more?" Sometimes I said yes, sometimes I said no. Either way, I felt like I was failing someone, either myself or them. There was no winning. I became the family bank, and banks don't get gratitude. They get used. I decided to host Christmas that year. It was a terrible idea driven by hope I should have abandoned years ago. My therapist would later ask me what I was trying to prove. I told her I didn't know, but that was a lie. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was making one final attempt to earn what should have been freely given. My family's love and recognition. I spent $3,000 I couldn't afford. I rented a room at the Heritage Inn, a beautiful historic venue with exposed brick and twinkling lights. I hired a caterer who did farm-to-table cuisine. There was a bartender, a pianist, custom decorations in gold and burgundy. I even had personalized gifts for everyone, expensive ones that I'd agonized over for weeks. My parents arrived first. My mother's eyes widened when she walked in. "Oh, honey," she said, and for a moment she looked at me the way I'd always wanted, with wonder, with pride. "This is beautiful. You did all this?" "I wanted it to be special," I said, my heart hammering. She squeezed my hand. "It is. It really is." That small gesture, that tiny acknowledgement, made everything feel worth it. This was it. This was the moment things would change. Kyle arrived 20 minutes late with his girlfriend, a quiet woman named Tessa who seemed uncomfortable in the fancy setting. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins trickled in. Everyone was impressed. People kept congratulating me on the venue, the food, the atmosphere. For the first time in my life, I was the center of positive attention in my family. It felt intoxicating. Dinner was perfect. The food was excellent. The wine flowing. Conversation warm. My mother kept looking around with this pleased expression. My father told a story about my childhood that was actually flattering. A rarity. Kyle was quiet, but I told myself he was just tired from work. Then came time for the toast. My father stood, glass in hand, and thanked everyone for coming. He talked about family, about traditions, about how grateful he and my mother were for another year together. Standard holiday stuff. Then Kyle stood up. "I want to add something," he said, and I felt a flutter of unease. Something in his expression was off, that hint of meanness he sometimes got when he'd been drinking. "It's great we're all here," Kyle continued, "in this fancy place that someone spent a fortune on." He gestured around the room, smiling, but his eyes were hard. "Really went all out, didn't you?" I felt my face flush. "I just wanted—" No, it's impressive," he cut me off. "Must be nice, having all that disposable income. Some of us have to actually work for a living instead of just crunching numbers all day." There were a few uncomfortable laughs. I couldn't tell if people thought he was joking. "Kyle?" my mother said quietly. "What?" "I'm giving a toast." His voice got louder. "To my sister, who's so generous with her money, who makes sure we all know exactly how generous she is. Must feel good, playing the hero." The room had gone silent. Everyone was staring. "I mean, let's be honest," Kyle continued, warming to his subject now. "If she disappeared tomorrow, like, just didn't show up to work, didn't answer her phone for a week, would anyone actually notice, besides the accountants wondering where she is?" Someone gasped. I couldn't tell who. "Would anyone miss her?" Kyle pressed. "Really? Or would we all just kind of go on with our lives?" "That's enough," my father said, but there was no real force behind it. Kyle raised his glass higher. "I bet nobody would even realize she was gone for at least a week. Maybe longer. That's how forgettable she is. So here's to—" "Stop," I whispered, but my voice came out too quiet to carry. "Here's to my sister. The human checkbook." Kyle finished his toast. A few people laughed. Nervous laughs, awkward laughs, but laughs nonetheless. My mother's face was tight with discomfort, but she didn't defend me. My father looked at his plate. My uncle actually chuckled like it was a joke. Kyle sat down, looking pleased with himself. Tessa whispered something urgent to him, pulling his arm, but he shrugged her off. I stood there, in this beautiful room I'd paid for, at this party I'd organized, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. The pianist was still playing softly in the corner. The lights still twinkled, but everything felt hollow. My hands were shaking. My face burned. 33 years of invisible ached in my chest. "Actually," I heard myself say, my voice stronger than I felt, "that's an interesting theory." Kyle looked up, surprised I was speaking. "Disappear for a week and nobody notices," I continued. "Want to bet on it?" He laughed. "What?" "I'll do it. I'll disappear. Let's see if you're right." The room was silent again, but different this time. Uncertain. "Oh, come on," Kyle said, but he looked uncomfortable now. I was just what? Joking? I smiled, but it felt wrong on my face. "Then there's no harm in testing it out, right? 1 week, no contact, let's see who notices." "Don't be dramatic," my mother said. "I'm not. I'm taking you up on your son's dare." I looked at each of them. 1 week, starting now. I grabbed my coat and walked out of the Heritage Inn, leaving behind my family, my beautiful party, and the last shred of hope I'd been holding on to for 33 years. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Part of me expected someone to come after me, to apologize, to say Kyle had gone too far. Nobody came. Through the venue windows, I could see the party continuing. People were talking, drinking, laughing. Life went on without me in the room, just like it always had. I drove home in a daze. The streets were decorated with Christmas lights, families visible through windows, warm and together. I felt like a ghost moving through a world I didn't belong to. Inside my condo, I stood in the dark living room and let myself cry. Not the pretty kind of crying from movies. The ugly, choking kind that comes from a lifetime of swallowed hurt finally breaking free. When I could breathe again, I opened my laptop. The joint account stared back at me from the screen. $2,000 I'd deposited 3 days ago. Money for January's expenses. Money they'd probably already mentally allocated to whatever they wanted. My finger hovered over the mouse. This was crazy, right? I was overreacting. Kyle was drunk, he'd apologize tomorrow. My mother would call and smooth things over. My father would say something about family sticking together despite disagreements. I refreshed my email. Nothing. Checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts saying, "Are you okay?" or "That was awful," or "Come back." Just a group text from Kyle. Drama queen much? Several family members had liked it. Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger exactly, something clearer, sharper. Resignation, maybe. Or clarity. I'd spent 33 years trying to earn a place in my family. I'd worked harder, achieved more, sacrificed more than Kyle ever had. I'd paid their bills, funded their lifestyle, made myself indispensable. And tonight, I'd thrown them a beautiful party trying to buy what I couldn't earn. For what? So my brother could publicly humiliate me? So my parents could sit there in silence? So my extended family could laugh? I thought about what Kyle had said. Would anyone notice if I disappeared? My therapist's voice echoed in my head from our last session. You keep waiting for them to change. But the only person you can change is yourself. I opened my banking app. The joint account sat there, mocking me with its balance. I stared at it for a long moment. Years of conditioning screamed at me to stop, to not be impulsive, to think about the consequences. But what consequences? That they'd be angry? They were already indifferent. That they'd struggle? They'd struggled before I helped. And they'd somehow survived. That I'd feel guilty. I already felt guilty all the time. Guilty for not doing enough. For asking questions about spending. For existing as an inconvenience. I created a new account. Transferred every penny from the joint account into it. Then I removed myself from the joint account entirely. Then I went further. I logged into my automatic payment system and canceled the monthly transfer. Went through every shared bill I'd somehow ended up on over the years. Kyle's car insurance, my parents' phone plan, subscriptions, and removed my payment information. My hands shook the entire time, but I didn't stop. I drafted a text to the family group chat. Taking you up on that disappearing act, 1 week, no contact. Let's see who notices. I deleted it. Too dramatic. Instead, I simply turned off my phone and put it in a drawer. The silence in my apartment was deafening. No phone notifications, no emails, no demands for attention or money or explanations. Just me, alone, with the choice I'd made. I felt terrified, guilty, relieved, exhilarated, like I'd just jumped off a cliff and wasn't sure if I'd hit water or rocks. I pulled out my laptop and opened a document. Started writing down everything, every slight, every comparison, every time I'd been made to feel less than, the science fair ribbon in the drawer, the missed award ceremonies, the car I'd saved for while Kyle got one as a gift, the years of funding their lives while mine stagnated. Writing it down made it real, made it impossible to minimize or excuse, made it impossible to pretend things weren't as bad as they were. By 3 a.m., I had 10 pages. I finally fell asleep on my couch, laptop still open, feeling more terrified and more free than I'd ever been in my life. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight, for the first time ever, I'd chosen myself. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. I just existed, in my own space, owing nothing to anyone. It felt like breathing after decades underwater. I woke up the next morning with my heart racing, certain I'd made a terrible mistake. The impulse to check my phone was overwhelming, so strong I actually walked to the drawer where I'd hidden it 3 times before stopping myself. What if my mother had called to apologize? What if something was wrong? What if they were worried? But I remembered that group text. Kyle's drama queen much? And the little thumbs-up reactions from family members. I left the phone where it was. Instead, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, staring at the bank account. The money I'd transferred sat there, real and final. I could still send it back, undo everything, pretend last night was just a dramatic gesture. My finger hovered over the keyboard. I thought about the spreadsheet I'd kept for 2 years, the thousands of dollars spent on restaurants while I ate meal prep on Sundays to save money, the new gaming computer while I drove a car with 150,000 miles, the vacation to the coast while I hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years. I thought about Kyle's words. Would anyone actually notice? I closed the laptop. The week stretched ahead of me like a test I wasn't sure I could pass. No contact meant no contact. No checking in, no explanations, no caving to guilt. 7 days to prove whether Kyle was right, whether I was truly invisible to my family unless I was useful. Day 1 was the hardest. Every hour felt like pulling against elastic that wanted to snap me back to familiar patterns. I cleaned my apartment obsessively, went to the gym, bought groceries for myself, real groceries, not just the cheapest options. I picked up expensive cheese without checking the price and felt simultaneously guilty and defiant. I lasted until noon before I pulled my phone out of the drawer just to look at it. Powered off, silent, it looked harmless. I could just turn it on for a second, just to make sure there were no emergencies. I put it back without turning it on. Day 2 was easier. I went to work and threw myself into a project I'd been putting off. My coworkers noticed something different about me. I was focused in a way I hadn't been in months, not distracted by family drama or financial stress. "You seem lighter," my colleague said at lunch. "Maybe," I said, and realized it was true. Day 3, I started to wonder if anyone had noticed yet. The bills would start coming due soon. The mortgage payment, the utilities, Kyle's car insurance. When would they realize the money wasn't there? Day 4, I almost caved. The guilt came in waves. What if my parents couldn't pay their bills? What if they were scared? What if my mother was crying? But then I remembered her face at the party. The way she'd looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The way she'd never once defended me from Kyle's lifetime of casual cruelty. The way family helps family only ever seemed to apply in one direction. I stayed strong. Day 5, something shifted. I wasn't just proving a point anymore. I was starting to enjoy the space, the silence, the lack of demands. I read a book I'd bought 6 months ago and never opened. Watched a movie without checking my phone every 10 minutes. Existed without being needed. Day 6, I started to realize this wasn't just a test for them. It was a test for me. Could I survive without their approval? Could I be enough for myself? Day 7 arrived like a finish line I was both eager and terrified to cross. I'd made it. 1 full week of silence. Of invisibility. Self-imposed this time. That evening, I finally turned on my phone. My hands shook as I waited for it to power up, imagining the flood of worried messages, the concerned voicemails, the panic I'd caused. The phone came to life. 12 notifications. My heart sank and soared simultaneously. 12 wasn't a lot for 7 days, but it was something. Maybe they had noticed. Maybe Kyle had been wrong. I opened my messages. 3 were from my cell phone carrier about my bill. 2 were from my dentist about an upcoming appointment. 4 were promotional emails I'd somehow allowed to send text notifications. 1 was from my credit card about a payment posting. 2 were from my family. The first, from day 2, was from Kyle. "Hey, streaming service isn't working. Did you forget to pay it?" The second, from day 5, was from my mother. "Honey, something's wrong with the account. Can you check it?" Several bills bounced. That was it. 7 days of silence and 2 messages, both about money. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We're worried about you." Not, "Kyle was awful and we're sorry." Just, "Fix the money problem." I sat on my couch, phone in hand, and laughed. It came out harsh and bitter, but it was laugh nonetheless. Kyle had been right, just not in the way he'd meant. They had noticed I was gone. They'd noticed the money was gone. Me? I was still invisible. The difference was, now I could see it too. Kyle called 3 hours after I turned my phone back on. I stared at his name on the screen, watching it ring. Feeling nothing but a strange calm, I answered. "Finally!" he exploded before I could say hello. "Where the hell have you been? The streaming services are all canceled and I had friends over last night. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We were worried." Just anger that I'd inconvenienced him. "I've been here," I said quietly. "Well, you need to fix the accounts. Like, now. I'm trying to watch something and—" "No." Silence. Then, "What?" "No. I'm not fixing the accounts." "Very funny. Look, I know I maybe went a little far at Christmas." "A little far?" My voice stayed level, which surprised me. "You stood up in front of our entire family and said nobody would notice if I disappeared. You made a joke out of me." "Oh my God, you're still on about that." "It was a joke. Everyone knew it was a joke." "Then why didn't anyone laugh until after you said it?" "Why did they laugh at me, Kyle?" "Because you're being sensitive. Jesus, you can't take a joke?" "It wasn't funny." "Whatever." His tone shifted to irritation. "Can you just fix the services? Mom and Dad are freaking out about bills too." "Those aren't my bills to pay." "What are you talking about? You've been paying them for 2 years." "Exactly. 2 years of paying for everything while you lived rent-free, worked part-time, and contributed nothing." "I contribute. I help around the house. You're 28 years old, Kyle, living at home, working 20 hours a week at a sporting goods store. That's not contributing. That's freeloading. I could hear his breathing, fast and angry. You know what? You've always been like this. Always acting like you're better than everyone because you have some boring office job. I'm not better than anyone. I'm just tired of being your ATM. You're seriously doing this? You're seriously cutting us off? I'm setting boundaries. Something I should have done years ago. This is bullshit. His voice cracked slightly. Anger or panic, I couldn't tell. Mom and Dad need that money. They're counting on you. They have retirement income. They have savings. Or they would if they hadn't spent it all on you. They'll figure it out. You're really going to do this to your family? The word family hit differently than it used to. Family was supposed to be about love, support, connection. All I'd ever gotten was obligation and usefulness. I'm doing this for myself, I said. You're being selfish. Maybe, or maybe I'm finally done being everyone's backup plan. When Mom calls crying, that's on you. Kyle, I said, and my voice was steady in a way it had never been with him before. I'm not your bank anymore. I'm not Mom and Dad's retirement plan. I'm not the safety net you fall into every time you screw up. I'm done. You'll change your mind, he said. But there was something uncertain in his voice now. Something that hadn't been there before. I won't. We'll see. He hung up. I set my phone down and realized I was shaking. Not from fear or guilt, but from adrenaline. I'd said no. I'd actually said no, and meant it. The phone rang again. My mother this time. I let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately. Voicemail again. Then a text. Please call me. We need to talk about the account. Then another. I don't understand what's happening. Why would you do this? Then my father. Your mother is very upset. Call her. I turned my phone to silent and set it face down on the coffee table. Part of me wanted to call back, to explain, to make them understand. The old part, the part that had spent 33 years trying to earn love, that was never going to come. But the new part, the part that had spent a week alone and survived, knew better. They didn't want to understand. They wanted me to fold, to apologize, to restore their comfort at the expense of my own. For the first time in my life, I chose my own comfort instead. The phone kept lighting up with notifications I didn't read. I made dinner, a real dinner, not just something quick between obligations. I ate slowly, savoring it. That night, I slept better than I had in years. My mother called again on day 9. This time, I answered. Hi, I said, my voice neutral. Oh, thank God. She sounded relieved, exhausted. Honey, I've been trying to reach you for days. What's going on? Why did you close the account? I didn't close it, I just removed myself from it. But we need that money. The mortgage payment bounced. The electric company is threatening to shut off service. We don't understand what happened. What happened is I stopped paying your bills. But you've always... She stopped herself. This is about Christmas, isn't it? About what Kyle said? Finally, someone was acknowledging it. Partly, I said. He was drunk. He didn't mean it. You know how he gets when he drinks too much. He called you yesterday, didn't he? I'm sure he apologized. He didn't apologize. Mom, he yelled at me about the streaming services being canceled. Well, he's under a lot of stress. His job isn't going well and... I don't care about Kyle's stress, I interrupted. I care that he humiliated me in front of our entire family. And you said nothing. Dad said nothing. You both just sat there. We didn't want to make a scene. It was Christmas and what? It was fine for Kyle to make a scene, but not fine for you to defend your daughter? Silence. Then, that's not fair. What's not fair is that I've spent 2 years paying your bills. What's not fair is that I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college while you paid for everything for Kyle. What's not fair is that I've been treated like an afterthought my entire life, and the only time anyone notices me is when the money stops. That's not true. We love you. The words should have meant something. For years, I would have clung to them, analyzed them, treasured them. Now they felt empty. When's my birthday, Mom? What? My birthday. What day is it? Why are you asking me this? Because I want to see if you know. A long pause. June 20th? 23rd. Kyle's is April 14th. You've never once forgotten his. That's not the same thing. You're right, it's not. Because you've never forgotten his and you frequently forget mine. My voice cracked slightly. Do you know what I do for a living? My exact job title? You're an accountant. Senior financial analyst. I got promoted 8 months ago. I told you in an email. You never responded. We get a lot of emails, honey, and things have been so busy. Do you know where I went on vacation 3 years ago? The only vacation I've taken in 5 years? Silence. Portland. I sent you pictures. Kyle went to Cancun last year on spring break, and you still have photos from that trip on your fridge. Mine never made it out of your phone. Why are you doing this? Her voice was thick now. Tears or frustration, I couldn't tell. Why are you being so cruel? I'm not being cruel, Mom. I'm telling you the truth. For 33 years, I've been invisible in this family unless you needed something from me, and I'm done with it. We're your parents. You can't just abandon us. I'm not abandoning you. I'm stopping paying your bills. There's a difference. We can't afford the house without your help. Your father's retirement isn't enough, and with Kyle not working full-time, then Kyle needs to get a full-time job. Or you need to downsize. Or you need to budget better. Those are all options that don't involve me sacrificing my own financial security. This is so selfish. She was crying now. Really crying. We raised you. We gave you a home. You gave me the minimum required to not be reported to CPS, I said flatly. You gave Kyle a home. You gave Kyle love. You gave Kyle everything. I was just there. That's not true. We love you just as much. Don't, I said. And my voice was hard. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to yourself. We both know it's not true. We've always known it's not true. She was sobbing now. Part of me wanted to take it back, to comfort her, to make it better. That instinct ran deep, deeper than logic or self-preservation. But I'd spent 33 years managing everyone's emotions but my own. I have to go, I said. Please, please don't do this. We need you. You need my money. That's not the same thing. What are we supposed to do? Figure it out. The same way I've had to figure everything out my entire life. Please. I hung up, set the phone down, stared at my hands, which were shaking again. My mother had cried. She'd begged. And I'd still said no. The guilt was crushing, a physical weight on my chest. Years of conditioning screamed that I was a terrible daughter, a terrible person, that I should call back, apologize, fix it. But underneath the guilt was something else, something quiet but strong, relief. I'd finally told the truth, and the world hadn't ended. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. I'm sorry we weren't perfect parents, but we did our best. Doesn't that count for something? I turned the phone off completely. Their best had never been enough, and I was done pretending it was. My father called 3 weeks later. Not my mother, not Kyle. Him. That's how I knew things were serious. We'd never had the kind of relationship where we called each other just to chat. Our interactions were functional, pleasant enough, but distant. He'd always deferred to my mother on emotional matters, content to be the quiet presence in the background. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hi, Dad. We need to talk. His voice was tight, controlled, the tone he used to use when I'd broken a rule as a kid. This has gone on long enough. What has? This tantrum. This punishment you're putting your mother through. Something cold settled in my stomach. Tantrum? You're angry about Christmas. I get it. Kyle crossed a line. But you don't punish the whole family for one person's mistake. One person's mistake that you did nothing to stop. What was I supposed to do? Make a scene in front of everyone? Yes! The word came out louder than I intended. Yes, Dad. You were supposed to defend me. You were supposed to tell Kyle he was out of line. You were supposed to act like you gave a damn that your son just humiliated your daughter in public. I talked to him afterward. Afterward doesn't matter. Don't you understand that? Defending me afterward in private where nobody sees, that's not actually defending me. That's just managing your own guilt. Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing, controlled and measured. We're going to lose the house, he said finally. My heart dropped. What? We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent a notice. We have 60 days to catch up or they start foreclosure proceedings. The panic was immediate and visceral. Lose the house, my childhood home, the place where, despite everything, I had some good memories buried under the bad ones. How did it get that bad? I asked. You stopped paying into the account. We had to cover everything ourselves, and it's more than we can manage. You have retirement income, Social Security. Dad, the math doesn't work. You shouldn't be that far behind after 3 weeks. A pause. We had some other expenses. What expenses? That's not... What expenses, Dad? Kyle needed help with some debt. Credit cards he'd run up. We had to help him or they were going to sue. I closed my eyes. How much? That's between us and Kyle. How much did you pay toward his credit card debt instead of your mortgage? $8,000. His voice was defensive now. He needed help. He's our son. I'm your daughter. You don't need help. You have a good job savings. You're fine on your own. Kyle struggles. He needs us. Kyle is 28 years old. He needs to face consequences for his actions, not get bailed out every time he screws up. You don't understand how hard it is for him. Stop. I was yelling now. Stop making excuses for him. Stop acting like he's some fragile thing that needs constant protection. He's not. He's a grown man who's never had to be responsible for anything because you keep rescuing him. So you're punishing him by punishing us? No. I'm setting boundaries that I should have set years ago. You chose to pay his credit cards instead of your mortgage. That's on you, not me. We're your parents. You're supposed to help family. I did help. For 2 years. And before that, I helped by never asking for anything. Never being a problem. Never requiring the time and money and attention you poured into Kyle. I helped by making myself invisible. That's not fair. You want to know what's not fair, Dad? I have $34,000 in my savings account. Do you know how much I'd have if I hadn't been funding your household for 2 years? Over $70,000. That's $36,000 I gave to this family. He was quiet. I could have bought a house. A real house, not a condo. I could have taken vacations. I could have had a life. Instead, I watched you spend my money on restaurants and new furniture and Kyle's gaming equipment while I ate cheap meals and drove a dying car. We didn't ask you to sacrifice. Yes, you did. Maybe not in those words, but every time you called with another emergency, every time you made me feel guilty for questioning the spending, every time you made it clear that Kyle needed help and I was capable of giving it, you asked. And I gave. And it was never enough. So that's it? His voice was hard now, angry. You're just going to let us lose everything. You're not going to lose everything. You're going to lose a house you can't afford. Then you'll downsize, budget properly, and live within your means. Your mother will be devastated. The guilt stabbed deep, but I held firm. Then she'll recover. People do. I never thought you could be this cold. The words hit like a slap. Cold. Cruel. Selfish. All the words they were using to describe me now that I'd stopped being useful. I'm not cold, Dad. I'm just done setting myself on fire to keep you warm. Don't call us again until you're ready to act like family. He hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. They were losing the house, my childhood home, because of me. No, not because of me. Because they'd chosen to pay Kyle's credit card debt instead of their mortgage. Because they'd spent years living beyond their means. Because they'd expected me to fund their choices indefinitely. This wasn't my fault. I had to keep repeating it to make myself believe it. This wasn't my fault. I found out they lost the house through my aunt. Not from my parents, not from Kyle. From my mother's sister, who called me 6 weeks after my father's ultimatum. I can't believe you let this happen, she said without preamble. Hello to you too, I said. They're moving into a 2-bedroom apartment. Your parents. After 30 years in that house. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for them? They couldn't afford the house. Because you abandoned them. I'd heard this so many times now the words barely landed. Abandoned. Selfish. Cold. Cruel. The family had decided on a narrative, and I was the villain. Where are they moving? I asked, ignoring the accusation. Riverside Gardens. That affordable complex near the highway. Your father is mortified. Your mother cries every day. Riverside Gardens. I knew it. Clean, safe, perfectly adequate. A significant downgrade from their house, but not the tragedy my aunt was making it sound like. And Kyle? I asked. A pause. What about him? Where's Kyle living? He's looking for his own place. He's not moving with them? The apartment only has 2 bedrooms. There's no space. I felt something crack in my chest. Not sadness. Something sharper. They'd lost their house, were moving to a smaller apartment, and Kyle still wasn't planning to contribute or help. He was just moving on. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. Mom and Dad lost the house. They're downsizing to an apartment. And Kyle, who has lived rent-free his entire adult life, who they paid $8,000 in credit card debt for, is getting his own place instead of helping them? He needs his independence. He's 28. He's had independence available to him this whole time. He chose not to take it. You don't understand how hard— Stop. Just stop. I'm not doing this anymore. I took a breath. How are they managing? Financially? Barely. Your uncle helped with the moving costs. I'm covering their security deposit. We're all pitching in because family helps family. The implication was clear. Everyone but me. That's good, I said. I'm glad they have support. You could still help, you know. It's not too late to fix this. There's nothing to fix. They made choices. Now they're living with the consequences. You're really going to let your parents struggle while you sit there with your comfortable life? My comfortable life. The one I'd built entirely on my own. The one I'd nearly bankrupted trying to fund theirs. Yes, I said simply. She hung up on me. Over the next few weeks, I heard through the grapevine how things were going. My parents had moved into the apartment. It was smaller, older, but functional. They were learning to budget properly for the first time in years. My father had taken a part-time consulting job to supplement their income. Kyle had moved into a studio apartment. Alone, for the first time in his life. According to my cousin, he was struggling hard. Couldn't figure out how to grocery shop efficiently. Complained constantly about having to clean. Had called my mother crying twice about feeling overwhelmed. My mother apparently still talked to him every day. Gave him advice, talked him through problems, reassured him he was doing great. She hadn't called me once. Part of me had expected her to reach out eventually, to apologize, or at least try to rebuild something. But weeks turned into months, and nothing. They'd made their choice. I'd been useful. And when I stopped being useful, I stopped being relevant. Kyle lasted 3 months before he quit his job at the sporting goods store. Too stressful, he told people. His boss was unreasonable. The hours were too demanding for 20 hours a week. Without income, he couldn't afford even his cheap studio. I heard he was couch surfing, staying with friends for a few days at a time. My parents couldn't take him in. The apartment lease specifically limited occupancy, and they couldn't risk eviction. For the first time in his life, Kyle had no safety net. I felt sorry for him. Not enough to help, but sorry nonetheless. He'd been enabled his whole life, set up to fail by parents who'd loved him too much to let him struggle. Now he was paying the price, but so were my parents. They'd spent decades prioritizing Kyle, and now that they needed him, he wasn't capable of stepping up. He'd never learned how. My uncle tried to take him in but kicked him out after 2 weeks when Kyle didn't contribute to groceries or household chores. My cousin lasted 5 days before telling Kyle he needed to find somewhere else. The family was learning what I'd known all along. Kyle couldn't function as an independent adult because he'd never been required to. And my parents were learning what it felt like to need help and not receive it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad. Sad for what could have been. Sad for the family we might have had if they'd loved me like they loved Kyle. Sad for Kyle himself, who'd been ruined by the very love that was supposed to protect him. But I didn't feel guilty anymore. That was something. 6 months after Christmas, I was living a life I barely recognized. Not because it was dramatically different, but because it was mine. I started therapy twice a week. Real therapy, where I talked about adoption trauma, scapegoat children, and the ways families can damage people who love them. My therapist didn't tell me I'd done the right thing or the wrong thing. She helped me understand why I'd done it, and that was more valuable. My savings account was growing again. I'd started contributing to my 401k properly. I bought a new car, nothing fancy, but reliable and paid for in cash. These small financial victories felt enormous after years of watching my money disappear into someone else's life. I went on dates. Some good, some terrible, all interesting. I was learning who I was when I wasn't defined by my family's needs. Turned out I liked hiking. I was terrible at pottery but enjoyed trying. I could spend an entire Saturday reading without feeling guilty about not being productive. My phone rarely rang with family calls anymore. Most of my relatives had taken sides, and very few had chosen mine. That hurt less than I expected. Quality over quantity, my therapist said. The people who mattered understood, or at least respected my choices. My friend group expanded. People from work, from my hiking group, from random places. They knew me as just me, not as someone's daughter or sister, not as a bank or a safety net. Just a person with interests and boundaries and a life. I heard updates occasionally through the few relatives still speaking to me. My parents had adjusted to apartment living. It wasn't easy, but they were managing. My father's consulting work was going well. My mother had joined a community garden and seemed to be enjoying it. Kyle had finally found full-time work through a temp agency. Nothing glamorous, warehouse work, inventory management. But it was 40 hours a week with benefits. And he was apparently showing up consistently for the first time in his adult life. He'd gotten his own apartment again, a small one-bedroom he could barely afford. But it was his. I didn't reach out. Neither did they. Sometimes I thought about that Christmas party, about Kyle's cruel words, my parents' silence, the family's laughter. It still hurt, but differently now. Like an old injury that aches in bad weather. Noticeable, but not debilitating. I thought about what I'd lost. The relationship with my parents would never be what I'd wanted it to be. Kyle and I would probably never speak again. I'd sacrifice the illusion of family unity, the comfort of belonging somewhere, even if that belonging was conditional. But I'd gained something too. Self-respect, financial stability, peace, the knowledge that I could survive on my own, that I didn't need their approval to be worthy of love and care. On the anniversary of that Christmas party, I did something I'd never done before. I threw myself a party. Small, intimate, just my closest friends. Nothing expensive or elaborate. Just good food, good wine, good people who actually cared about me. One friend asked about my family, if I missed them, if I ever thought about reaching out. Sometimes, I admitted, but I think they'd have to want a real relationship, not just my money. And I don't know if they're capable of that. That must be hard, she said. It is. But it's less hard than pretending I mattered to them when I didn't. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood in my clean apartment with its modest furniture and its absence of family photos. My home, my space, my life. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Kyle. Mom gave me your new number. I know it's been a while. I've been thinking about what happened. About what I said. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to reply immediately. Part of me wanted to delete it. Part of me wanted to analyze every word, looking for the apology that wasn't quite there. Instead, I set the phone down. I'd answer eventually maybe, or maybe I wouldn't. That was the beauty of boundaries. I got to choose. I'd spent 33 years being invisible unless I was useful. Now I was visible to myself, and that was enough. Some days were hard. Some days I felt the pull of old patterns, the guilt, the what-ifs. Some days I questioned everything I'd done, but most days, I felt free. I wasn't the family bank anymore. I wasn't the forgotten daughter, the responsible one, the invisible child who existed in the margins of other people's lives. I was just me, flawed, learning, growing, building a life on my terms. And if my family ever wanted to be part of that life, really part of it, not just visitors who showed up when they needed something, they knew where to find me. But I wasn't holding my breath. I'd spent enough of my life waiting for love that was never going to come. Now I was learning to give it to myself instead. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.